What's going on, guys? My name is Valued, and today we're going to be talking about one of the most important topics in the game, and that is solo queuing. You might feel like it's impossible to gain RP or even win pub games as a solo, but I'm here to show you that you can climb as a solo player. We have a lot to talk about today, guys, so let's get right into the good stuff. Apex as a game is designed for friends to team up and have a blast playing together. Unfortunately, you don't always have a friend group online at the same time, or maybe you're even solo queuing strictly to improve your own gameplay. Whatever the reason, it's a great choice to be solo queuing, as this is an amazing way to learn your strengths and weaknesses so you can identify where you need to improve. When it comes to solo queuing ranked, it doesn't matter if you're bronze or masters, your number one goal should be to get max kill participation and then play placement to ensure the maximum RP. This might lead to some moments where you just have to ignore your teammates if they're doing something counterproductive to your RP gain. A lot of the time in lower elos, players tend to want to keep fighting after achieving max KP. This doesn't always bode well for your game though, and we'll explain a bit more on that in a little bit. You want to make sure you're communicating that you don't want to go along with those plans, but definitely don't be mean about it. If you want to type it in chat, that works too, but don't give any pressure that causes you to deviate from your goal, which is playing placement and getting max RP once you have max kill participation. Without the confidence of a 3-stack, you have to be very smart with where you position yourself off drop and in the final rings. Solo queuing is something that many players refuse to do, and we're hoping to change that. If you're confident at solo queuing in Apex and consistently gaining RP, then you're going to have a lot more time to grind the ranks than if you're only playing when your full stack is online, which might be 2 times a week or even less. Many players find themselves sitting in an LFG for a long time just to have the team disband on the first loss. This can all be really frustrating, leaving players feeling hopeless on their grind. If you guys find yourself struggling season after season, then maybe it's time to stop looking for a group and start looking for a coach to tailor your gameplay. ProGuides offers professional coaches who will help you achieve your personal goals in Apex Legends. They're available 24/7, and on top of that, they know exactly what you're going through in Apex because they've seen it all and been through it all personally. Make sure to check it out in the description below. Alright guys, now let's start breaking down how exactly you should be playing as a solo queue player, with the king of any skill needed for a team to succeed, and that is communication. If we were to do a skill tier list for a solo queue player, then honestly, we think communication would definitely go in the S tier. Using your mic to talk to your teammates and tell them things is going to lead to a better team than no one talking whatsoever. Doing a quick mic check early in the game might be a good idea because it gives you a vibe for what kind of teammates you're going to have. Just sound confident and at a normal volume. Try not to yell your mic checks, as some people might mute you right away if you're super loud or just come off a little bit abrupt. And if you don't feel confident using your mic, then you can type something to them as well and see if they respond. When you're solo queuing, it's also useful to try and identify if your teammates are a duo or if they're both solos. If they are teamed up, then a lot of the time they're going to be in a Discord together talking, so you might see them working better together than 2 solos. Now keep in mind guys, if anyone responds rudely or inappropriately, we highly recommend just muting them right away and dealing with one teammate hearing you rather than a toxic one. We found that more times than not, players are happy to communicate to some degree, and even if they're not talking, they will follow behind anyone doing the callouts. And speaking of callouts, let's talk about some of the best callouts for you to do as a solo player that will help your teammates have more confidence in you and to help you out a little bit more. Anytime you have a recon character on your team, pinging survey beacons is a great idea because oftentimes, depending on your elo, they won't scan them on their own. Also on top of that, pinging on the map and telling your team exactly where you think the ring is going to end is always a great idea to have early game right off the drop. And speaking of the drop, you also should be pinging your drop every single game, as many times players don't enjoy being the jump master because they don't have the confidence to drop their team somewhere on the map. Also, communicating what you need off the drop is going to be super useful because you'll have multiple sets of eyes looking for things that you need. And when you're landing, you want to look around for your team and mentally mark where every team lands as long as you can see. Thinking about this the entire time you're looting will be helpful to plan your next rotation or your first team fight of the game. When you're looting, make sure to ask your team if they're happy with what they have, and if they reply yes, then we definitely recommend getting into an early fight so you're not pressured to fight during the riskier mid-game when every team is hungry for their KP. During the first fight, you should communicate where you want to position and who you're shooting at. Calling legends out with damage really helps your team focus on the right targets quicker. If there's any risk of a third party, which we always feel is a risk, you need to wipe the team quick and cleanly. You can do this by taking the lead in your fights by pushing up first and calling out what you're doing. This gives your teammates a huge amount of confidence and also opens up angles for them as enemies try to focus you. After your first fight goes well and your team's sitting with some early KP, this is where a lot of teams make the mistake of continuing to fight when what you should be doing is playing for placement. Taking a fight mid-game after your initial KP is a bit wasteful because getting to top 3 should happen every game you play for placement. Playing for the win from this position will almost always get you KP, and if you're already max, this means you essentially worked harder and riskier for 0 reward. Getting 6 KP and winning the match is the #1 goal if you want to gain RP. So every move you make for your team should be in favor of this goal. The way I like to think about it is, if you feel risky putting yourself somewhere, then why would you want to put your team there? After the early game fight, you want to position yourself in a good spot for the next ring. And by this point, you should be making an educated guess on where the ring is going to end and planning your rotation to that. And if you're not super educated on the zone, you need to be hitting beacons as often as possible. The way I think about rotations is the earlier the better, as many teams aren't even thinking about the end game until it's right in front of them. If your teammates get antsy and they don't want to play placement with you after your initial fight, then you might need to let them go off or try to communicate to them what you're trying to do and why it's beneficial to them. At the end of the day, this might seem selfish, but this is your solo queue grind, and you don't need to throw your RP down the drain just for a random's bad call that you might not ever see again. This also goes for when they get knocked in a teamfight early game and you play their banner cards instead of reses to ensure your safety. If you can't get their banner cards, then simply don't. Apologize quickly in game for the situation and get as much RP as you can from there. If they stay, then they'll also get RP if you do well, so most will be okay with just watching it out. Mentally, you need to be able to say to yourself that your call is better for gaining RP and just stick to it. Waiting around with 3 KP until the end game is going to earn you more RP in the last 3 games that you got 5 KP hot dropping but died above the top 12. Not every team will have ring info, so if you end up without a recon character, try to position your team in the center of the second circle, and you should have good access to every ring from there. Late game is all about patience, but also ensuring you don't get run over by an overly aggressive team. Lots of times in ranked, you can have that one team in a top 5 scenario that will jump pad on anything in front of them. So positioning your team in a spot where you have a lot of vision around you and your back is clear is going to be the best way to ensure that top 3 scenario. Once you're top 3 is when you finally get to choose how you want to finish off the game. If your team had some fights and you're full KP already, then sit back and kick your feet up because all you're going to do is wait for the other 2 teams to fight. Now, this doesn't always happen as we want it, so you might need to encourage a fight by poking damage at either team and getting them to shoot back, or something of the likewise. The biggest thing is you need to try to avoid taking much damage, as the goal is to make sure you know both teams' locations so you can position yourself to where they're more likely to fight before you have to. If your team didn't have but maybe one fight, then you might have to look to make a move on one of these teams to get your KP. In a top 3 scenario, if you don't know both teams' locations, then you should not take a fight at all. Instead, find their locations and decide which one is in a worse position and if the other team is in a position to third party you quickly. One thing to keep in mind, guys, is you have to take note of what legends are on each team. This helps lessen the surprise of an Octane jump pad or Valkyrie ult to third party, since you'll already be thinking about it. If the 2 teams are separated enough for a fight, then definitely take that opportunity. To get a quick team wipe, you need to start out the fight by getting an early knock. This should be done by communicating which legend you want to focus right away and trying to time the opening shots on them. Making sure to play your health and not overcommit, knowing you could still be third-partied, will set you up to take that last team fight for the win. Keep in mind, guys, you need to play the last team fight calm and collected, and be aware if there might be a Kraber or another power weapon in play. Positioning should be focused on whatever high ground is in the final ring and trying to bait out any and all abilities from the enemy team. Taking it slow and waiting for the other team to make a mistake will be the most consistent way to win every top 2 situation you find yourself in. One final note, guys, you need to use your ultimate in any legendary weapon sparingly and not waste them in the endgame. Keep in mind, guys, solo queuing is not the easiest thing in the world, but it's definitely the most rewarding thing you can do in Apex Legends to find yourself improving at the game. Outside of ranked, it's the perfect way to improve your personal gameplay and dial in your playstyle. In ranked, it's a true show of your skill as you test everything you've learned during your time playing Apex. Communication, positioning, gun skill, looting, decision making, and so much more. Playing smart and keeping your goal of gaining RP in the forethought of your mind is going to be the key to performing at the best of your ability. Understanding that 6 KP is the max is very important because a lot of times I've seen squads W key the entire game just to die in the top 10 and not gain enough RP. One note to consider with KP is you want to take early game fights because it doesn't only help you with this KP, but it also boosts your entire team's confidence for the rest of the game, knowing that you already have some kills under your belt. Position yourself where you aren't worried about being shot in the back because you haven't cleared that side of the ring. And last but definitely not least is to play confident. Know you're making good calls for you, but also understand any failures during your solo queue experience and learn these amazing lessons for yourself. Alright guys, well that does it for me. These have been the best tips that we've got for you to gain RP consistently as a solo queue player. Make sure to slap the like button if you enjoyed and sub to the channel so you don't miss any of the amazing content that we have coming out for the rest of Season 10 and beyond. Again guys, my name has been Valued and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.